architecture and property drove a lot of my decisions early on. It's like, if I loved the site, I'd say, it doesn't matter about the neighborhood, really, you know?
Is there an example of that?
Well, like Hampstead, I was just like, you know, I don't know, why did you go to Hampstead? It's like, there was nothing there. There were already, it's like a few bakeries, or like 2 bakeries there. But I loved the corner site, right? So I did that. Then at Notting Hill, we were only going to do one, but I fell in love with the Notting Hill Portobello one. You know, I knew the guy. It was it was something before, and then it was an art thing, but he was failing. But it was such a cool building on the corner. I was like, oh, shit, you know, something needs to happen in this space. And so I fell in love with the property and said, okay, well, we'll make something fun out of this beautiful property. So I do love, you know, buildings. And I think, gosh, in London, there's just so many full of character buildings, right? So I think that's one thing, is like, sometimes we just start with the building, not the neighborhood. As we get bigger, we kind of think, okay, we you know, it's a neighborhood, and can we find a nice building in there? And we always like the challenge.
So did you look at the neighborhood, like how? Because you're opening, I think I read somewhere 3 to 4. I don't know how many. There's a lot more sites basically.
Yeah, we did like over 30 last year.
Like, what's the process to saying, right, we think this is going to work, or this?
Yeah, it's a good look. It's kind of half math and half art, because I mean, you know, you can do some. We've got some algorithms that I've built with some guys, which is a creative process. It's kind of saying,
what's what we said at the beginning,
using
science and art, same thing.
Same thing, right?
Yeah.
So I mean, I want to put science into it, right? Because I want to free my mind in the space to really think about the place.
What are those algorithms?
So those algorithms, we built it. I mean, it's probably 8 years we've been building it. It's like, why would somebody want a bakery in every neighborhood? And basically, we ended up with an algorithm that can tell you kind of every postcode in the country what we might be able to do there based on what we've done. Now, it's just math, right? So you still have to get your head into that neighborhood, ask some questions, feel it, get, you know, what side of the street, what, you know, is it a building you love? Is it this kind of thing? But, you know, I get half of it to be science. And that was a creative process. It's like, why would somebody be there? Well, you know, maybe it's a little bit about schools, right? And it's a little bit about, you know,
schools as in like actual
yeah. I mean, how many schools are around there? Yeah. You know, how many churches are around there? Like, you know, how far are you from the tube? You know, but what I find is that our sites are, you know, GAILs can exist. One can exist because there's lots of people around near a tube, you know, and wealthy, right? And then one can do really well because it's, you know, it's basically in a community that they don't have much, and you know, they have to drive somewhere else, and there's not much footfall, and you know, I don't know, it could be one school or something. And
what when you say the maths of the algorithm, like just swim into those lanes a bit more, please,
yeah.
Tom. Like,
well, it's been developed over a couple of years. I did it with a friend of mine, my son's. He was a data scientist. Now he's our chief technology officer, and we started working on this thing, trying to answer the question like, what does make a good place? And we realized that it's just not like if it's wealthy it works, or if it's high footfall it works, or it's near a tube it works. It's not a correlation, right? It's a complex, you know, set of inputs. And one input could be at 100, and one could be at 20, but then and then another one could be at 30, and then another site, those 3 inputs could be at different measurements.
What are some of the inputs?
Yeah, well, we would have like we have this thing called like retail density. I look at like, you know, how many sites are there, and how many would be associated, which I would call kind of nice brands, and how many disassociated. Right, so
disassociated would mean like cafes there. Is what you're saying?
Yeah, we do a thing on competition, the competitive land. So, you know, competitive landscape, but the impact of competitive landscape is actually pretty small. But you kind of want to know that there is something there. There is competition, right? That's kind of what we found, is that we want to go to a place that is competitive. So you look at competitive landscape, you look at the footfall, you look at access to transport. You know, you look at the spend that people have available to them, so demographics. And we've put them into a model that kind of learns on its own about like, okay, so every new site I have, I put in there.
Wow.
And we say, okay, what did we do? And it feeds the model, right? So we can.
It's all AI as well.
Yeah, now it's becoming. I mean, AI is basically, you know, now it's more advanced, but it's the same kind of thinking, where you just keep on feeding a model, and the model can tell you, hey, I think you should be, you might look at this area, or I think that this might work. And then that at least just gets us that beginning, and we can say, hey, okay, let's use the science. Now we need to use our brain. That's 50% of the answer. Now let's go to that neighborhood if we don't know it, let's say.
Yeah.
and you start asking questions.
And that's the art.
About what, and that's the art.
Yes.
Yeah, and one without the other is like, making art without any science in this case
Also,
is really time consuming. It doesn't let you refine stuff. It makes you're doing a lot of brute force work. Whereas what the math does is says, like, I can go through tons of data, and tell me what you think's important, and I'll tell you what kind of matches that, and then we say, okay, good, identify places that we might work, and then we go out and ask ourselves, will it?
What we said right at the beginning about art and science being two sides of the same coin, and what you're saying with this algorithm is a piece of art, really. And I think if you actually look at it, take a step back, coding, and I write pretty much every day.
Yep.
Writing and coding is basically the same thing. You're like you're whether someone's taking a word out and then re-putting a word in, and then you create this thing. Whether that's a book or an art piece of art, coding, you're taking bits out, taking bits in, putting, and then it creates some sort of app or whatever. But it is the same thing, and I love what you've created this sort of this algorithm. Then as we swim to sort of from coding here to say the art stuff, how are you making people fall in love with the brand and making it feel like kind of unique to that place? What was the place you went to? And I think you spelt the name wrong and you gave out free tea or something like that.
Well, I remember Neo Bankside would give out free bread for like 4 days because I just wanted everybody to try it.
Yes.
What I found is that people would go in line. We were spending more time serving people on bread than we did anything else. But we still do that. We still basically go into a community and say, hey, look, we're here, and and we say have a loaf of bread because that's what we do. And just enjoy it on us. It's a gift.
It's a gift. And then what about the actual physical stores and making them?
Well, everyone is designed by us, and me and Roy are still we go through the process. We bespoke each one about what's the design, what's the look. We start out with our process is basically first an algorithm a little bit, then we go looking around and we see one, and then when we go design the sites, it's always the first starting point is, what is this neighborhood about? And the architects all know that. And we say, this is like an old Georgian neighborhood. It basically got built back in, time. Over the time, this has kind of happened to it. Okay, so now we know what this community has gone through, when it was built, what it's gone through, what's the major stuff. And some of the stuff is that locals wouldn't even know. Like a cinema.
Is there an example of
Yeah, like in Bristol, we're doing one, and it's got one of the first cinema houses on one end, and some other beautiful building, like Roman building that has got an interesting history. And we try to combine both of those into the design of that, and then we talk about it. So you can almost like...
So you got cinema and Roman building.
Yeah. We just said, okay, how do we use those two things that are in its past, to create something today?
Espressos is sponsored by supply chain software gurus Unleashed. It talks to your e-com and accounting software. It's helped islands cut admin time in half, get granular clarity on your margins, know where your stock is, don't miss availability. Brands like Candy Kittens, Tiny Rebel and Trip all use Unleashed, and so should you.